The iron train thundered westward, its wheels screaming against the rails as though protesting the land it cut through. Smoke poured backward in thick black ribbons, staining the pale sky above the prairie. Inside the third-class car, heat and stench pressed close. Coal dust, sweat, old tobacco, and damp wool trapped together with too many bodies and too little mercy. Celeste Ward sat by the window. She did not slump, she did not fidget. Her broad shoulders were squared, her back straight, her hands folded over a faded cloth bag resting on her lap. The bag was all she owned. 2 dresses, sewing needles wrapped in paper, a Bible with loose pages, and a scrap of dried lavender from a home that no longer existed. At 34, Celeste had learned how to become still. Outside the window, the prairie stretched endless and indifferent. Brown grass bowed under the wind. Tumbleweeds rolled like wandering spirits. The land did not care who she was or what she carried. It asked nothing of her but to pass through. Inside the car, the world was crueler. A whisper drifted from the bench behind her. "Bad luck rides with us now." A snicker followed, then another voice, louder, emboldened by the laughter. "If this train jumps the tracks, we'll know why." Celeste felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her eyes forward. She had heard worse, much worse. Words had long ago lost the power to surprise her. Still, they found their way into old wounds, pressin' where scar tissue never fully formed. A young man leaned into the aisle, craning his neck just enough to stare. "Ain't that a sign?" he said, nodding toward her. "Travelin' alone, like that." Laughter rippled through the car, uneven and sharp. Boots thumped against the wooden floor in mocking rhythm, as if the train itself had joined their sport. Celeste did not turn. Across the aisle, a baby began to cry. Its mother scooped it up quickly, pressing the child's face into her shoulder. "Hush now," the woman murmured, glancing pointedly at Celeste. "Don't look." That broke something loose. The laughter grew louder, bolder. A heavy-set man with red cheeks stood, planting his hands on his hips as though claiming the space. "This kind don't belong on a train. Nothing but trouble follows." Heads nodded. Agreement passed like a current. Celeste's fingers tightened around the strap of her bag until her knuckles ached. Her heart hammered, each beat loud in her ears. She wanted to speak, to say she had paid her fare, that she had harmed no one, that she was simply traveling west like the rest of them. But she swallowed the words. A lifetime had taught her the cost of protest. Silence was the last defense she still possessed. She fixed her gaze on the window again, on the blur of land rushing past. The prairie did not mock her, it did not laugh, it simply endured. She borrowed its steadiness and held herself together with it. Then, cutting clean through the noise, came a voice she had not expected. "Only cowards take pleasure in shaming others." It was not loud, it did not need to be. The car froze. The laughter died mid-breath, as if snuffed by an unseen hand. The heavy man stiffened, his mouth still half open. Slowly, every head turned toward the back of the car. A tall man was standing there, one hand braced against the bench for support. He moved with care, as though his body were an unreliable thing. His frame was lean, his shoulders slightly bent, his hair smoke-gray threaded with white. Illness had carved hollows into his face, but his eyes, sharp, steady, unflinching, held the room. Asher Boon. The name traveled faster than the train itself. Landowner, cattleman, wealth, power. A man rumored to be as hard as winter stone and as fragile as glass beneath it. He let his gaze sweep the car, slow and deliberate. No anger, no theatrics, just a cold, measured assessment that made grown men look away. To mock a woman for the color of her skin is not humor, it is fear. No one spoke. The red-cheeked man shifted, sniffed, and sat back down without a word. Others suddenly found interest in their boots, their hats, the floor. Shame crept in quietly, unwelcome but undeniable. Asher's breath hitched, a faint tremor passing through his frame. Still, he did not sit until he had said his piece. This train is crowded, the journey is long. Every soul here has reason enough to ride it. If you need amusement, he added, eyes hardening, find it elsewhere. Only then did he lower himself back onto the bench, coughing softly into his fist. The car remained silent. Celeste had not moved, but she felt something shift inside her chest. Slowly, carefully, she turned her head. Their eyes held. No pity, no curiosity. There was something else there. Recognition, perhaps, or memory, or a quiet understanding that startled her more than the cruelty ever had. It felt as though he had seen her long before this moment. Her breath caught. She looked away quickly, heart racing, pulse loud in her ears. She did not know why his defense unsettled her more than the jeers, perhaps because it cracked open a door she had long nailed shut. Around them, the train resumed its rhythm. Wood creaked. Someone cleared their throat. Life moved on, but the air had changed. No one laughed again. As the iron wheels carried them west, Celeste Ward sat unbroken in her seat, no longer alone, yet newly aware that something had begun. Not romance, not rescue, fate. And somewhere behind her, a sick man with a stranger's eyes carried a question he did not know yet how to ask.
Dodge City rose out of the prairie like a dare. Dust clung to everything, boots, hems, throats. Wagons crowded the main street by day, wheels grinding dirt into the air. By night, saloon lamps bled red light onto staggering men and loose laughter. The town breathed whiskey, leather, horse sweat, and gunpowder. It was a place that swallowed the uncertain whole or hardened them into something unrecognizable. Celeste Ward arrived with a few coins and her cloth bag. She felt the eyes immediately, some curious, some dismissive, others sharp with the kind of judgment that needed no words. She had walked through worse towns than this, but Dodge City carried its hostility openly like a badge. What mattered was work. After 2 days of asking, of being waved away or laughed off, she found herself standing in front of Hendrick's Diner. The sign creaked overhead, paint peeling, boards warped by years of sun and wind. Inside, the place was packed. Cowboys, miners, traders, men with dirt still under their nails and hunger etched into their faces. The owner, Widow Hendrick, looked Celeste up and down with a gaze that missed nothing. "Works hard," the woman said flatly. "Pays poor. $1 a day, you feed yourself. If you can stomach that, get started." Celeste nodded once. She tied on an apron and stepped into the noise. The first days blurred together. Clats clattered, coffee burned, men barked orders and comments with equal ease. "Sweeten my coffee, girl. Careful, might catch bad luck eating from her hand." Laughter followed, coarse and unashamed. Celeste kept her head down. Silence again became her shield. By the 4th morning, her legs ached and her hands stung from scrubbing grease out of cracked wood. She bent over a table, wiping it clean, when something made her still. In the far corner of the diner, away from the worst in the noise, sat a tall, gaunt man, Asher Boon. He was alone, his dark coat dusted from travel, his hat resting beside his plate. His shoulders were bent with weariness, and when he lifted his coffee, his hand trembled just enough for her to notice. His face looked drawn,
paler than she remembered from the train. Shadows pooled beneath his eyes, like sleepless nights had taken up residence there. The memory of the train rushed back, the silence he had commanded, the way his eyes had found her. Celeste's pulse quickened. She turned away quickly, pressing her cloth to the table, but she felt his gaze all the same, not invasive, not lingering, just present, like a steady weight in the room. She moved between tables, serving, clearing, working, yet each time she passed the corner, she felt the pull of awareness. When she dared glance his way again, his gray eyes met hers. Recognition. Her chest tightened. She lowered her gaze and kept moving. Asher did not call her over. He did not speak. He finished his meal slowly, left his coins on the table, and rose with care, as though standing itself cost him something. When the bell on the door chimed behind him, the diner swallowed him back into its noise. Celeste stood still for a moment longer than necessary. Then she went to clear his table. That was when she saw it. A dark brown leather wallet lay beneath the bench where he had been sitting, heavy, worn smooth by years of use. Her breath caught as she picked it up. She knew at once it was his. She glanced around. Widow Hendrick was clattering pans in the back. Ruth, the other waitress, was busy at the window. No one paid her any mind. Celeste opened the wallet just enough to be sure. Inside were folded bills, papers, and a photograph. Her heart lurched. The woman in the picture was black, dressed neatly in a light gown, hair pinned back with care. Her face was strong, calm, unmistakably dignified, and the resemblance struck Celeste like a blow. The curve of the cheekbones, the set of the mouth, the depth of the eyes. It was as though she were looking at herself reflected through another life. A chill ran through her. Why would Asher Boon, wealthy white rancher, carry such a photograph? And why did that woman look as if she shared Celeste's blood? She snapped the wallet shut, pulse racing. Without thinking further, she slipped off her apron and pushed out into the harsh midday sun. The street shimmered with heat and dust. She spotted him ahead, moving slowly along the boardwalk, one hand pressed to his chest as if holding himself together. "Mr. Boon," she called. He turned, surprise flickering briefly across his face. "You left this," she said, holding out the wallet. He took it after a pause. His fingers brushed hers, cold, firm despite the tremor beneath. The touch sent a shiver up her arm. "Thank you," he said quietly. She nodded, turning to leave, when his voice stopped her. "Miss Ward." The sound of her name struck like a bell. She turned back, suspicion sharpening her gaze. How did he know? Asher did not explain. Instead, he spoke with careful deliberation. "I would like to buy you supper." Her first instinct was refusal. In Dodge City, such a thing would not go unnoticed. A black woman dining with a white rancher would ignite gossip like dry grass to flame. But the image of the wallet burned behind her eyes. "Tomorrow," he added, "after your shift, I'll wait at the saloon across from the depot." She studied him, his drawn face, the steadiness beneath the frailty, the quiet certainty in his tone. There was no jest there, no demand, only intention. "If you wish it," she said finally. He inclined his head in thanks and turned away, disappearing into the haze of the street. Celeste stood where she was, dust curling around her skirts, the weight of the photograph pressing against her thoughts. This was not chance. Whatever waited at that supper would not be simple gratitude. It would open a door, one that led back into questions she had never known how to ask, and a future she could not yet see. She returned to the diner, but her heart knew one thing for certain. Fate had followed her off the train.
The Pine Saloon sagged beneath the weight of voices and smoke. Lamps burned low, their amber light smearing shadows across warped floorboards. Cards slapped tables, whiskey glasses clinked, boots scuffed dust into the cracks like a second layer of earth. It was a place built for noise, for forgetting, for men who wanted to drown their thoughts at the bottom of a glass. Yet in the corner by the window, stillness held. Celeste Ward sat straight-backed at the small table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She had scrubbed her hands raw before coming, smoothed her dress as best she could, pinned her hair with care. Still, she felt every eye that drifted their way and lingered too long. A black woman sitting across from a white rancher was not a sight Dodge City had prepared itself to accept. Asher Boon sat opposite her, his tall frame folded inward as if conserving strength. His coat hung loose on him, and when he lifted his coffee cup, his hand shook faintly. He noticed it too, and set the cup down carefully, as though unwilling to let weakness announce itself. "Thank you for coming," he said. "A debt returned is settled with thanks," Celeste replied evenly. "One meal is enough." A faint smile touched his lips, tired but genuine. If only debts were so easily measured. They ate in silence at first, cold meat, bread, coffee gone bitter. Around them laughter rose and fell, but the space between them remained oddly contained, as though the world had leaned away to listen. Asher spoke again. "I wanted to hear your story." Celeste's fingers tightened together. She had scrubbed her hands to guard her past, to keep it folded and hidden like a worn letter. But something in his tone, quiet, uninsistent, undid her. "I was born back east. My parents worked fields that were never theirs. Fever took them when I was 16. Since then, I've worked wherever hands were needed, sewing, washing, keeping house." She paused, swallowing. "No matter the work, this skin made me a joke. I was thrown out of a diner once for sitting at the wrong table, struck for touching cloth at a market. I stitched wedding gowns for women who never learned my name. They called me the shadow in the sewing room." Asher did not interrupt. He did not shift or sigh. He listened as though each word mattered. "So," Celeste said quietly, "we both learned what it is to be refused." "Yes," he agreed. "You for your skin, I for my body. The world always finds its reasons." A strange warmth spread between them, not comfort exactly, but recognition. Two lives shaped by rejection, seated across from one another by chance, that no longer felt accidental. Asher leaned back slightly, studying her face. "That is why I asked you here, not only for the wallet. When you returned it, I knew I owed you more than money." She frowned faintly. "You owe me nothing." "I owe you honesty." Silence stretched. Then his voice changed, lower, rougher. "Celeste Ward," he held her gaze, "can you tell me what a woman tastes like?" The words landed heavy, abrupt as a dropped blade. Her breath caught. Heat surged into her face. She stared at him, disbelief warring with anger. "What did you say?" "I have never touched one," he continued, unflinching. "I have never been chosen. I have no strength for games and no time for courtship." Her spine stiffened. "And you think I would what? Be bought with supper and honesty?" "No," he immediately replied. "I ask because I saw your straightness of spirit on that train. I want that in my house." The saloon noise crept back in, but distant, muffled by the pounding of her heart. "You know nothing of me," she said sharply. "True, but 42 years have taught me this. Character shows itself in moments. A year of courting may reveal less than a word spoken at the right time." His voice wavered, breath catching. "I have lived half a life in an empty house. I will not die in it." Celeste's anger faltered, tangled with something deeper. She saw it then, not insult, not desire,
but fear, raw and unadorned. "You think I'd agree because you're wealthy?" she asked. "No, I asked because Providence set us on the same train, the same street, the same hour. If you refuse, I will accept it." The photograph flashed in her mind, the woman's face so like her own, questions she did not yet know how to voice. Celeste drew a long breath. "Yes," she said. Asher stilled, hope flickering across his worn face like a candle lit in darkness. And in that corner of a noisy saloon, two strangers crossed a line that would change everything.
Rumor did not creep through Dodge City. It ran. Within days of the wedding, the town buzzed with it, words flung from saloon to street to church pew with the ease of breath. A wealthy rancher, sickly and near death, had married a black woman no one had known a week prior. Some laughed, others sneered, most assumed they understood everything. "She's clever," one man said over cards, "knows his days are numbered." "A gold digger in a plain dress," another muttered, "just waiting to inherit." Celeste Boon heard the whispers everywhere. In the market, where women paused mid-sentence as she passed. At church, where voices dropped into brittle silence behind her. No one challenged her openly. They did not need to. The weight of their stares did the work for them. Asher paid the talk little mind. "They've always needed something to chew on," he said, coughing into his hand. "Let them." Life on the ranch settled into a quiet rhythm. The house was plain, sturdy, shaped by years of solitude. Celeste filled it with motion, cooking, cleaning, tending the garden choked with weeds. Most of all, she tended Asher. She rose before dawn to brew honeyed tea. She slipped garlic and lemon into stews, onion and sage into broths, old remedies taught by women who had learned to survive with what the earth gave freely. Asher noticed only that his sleep deepened, that his cough loosened, that breath came easier. She kept the jars hidden, not because she feared his judgment, but because she feared the town's. In a place like Dodge City, sickness invited vultures, and a black woman caring for a wealthy, ailing man invited something worse. The night the storm came, the wind cut sharp across the prairie, rattling shutters and setting the lamp flame dancing. Celeste stood at the stove, straining a broth, when she heard boots outside. Not one or two, many. Voices rose, loud, slurred, angry. She looked out the window and felt her blood run cold. Torches bobbed in the dark like fireflies gone mad. A crowd of men, 20 or more, stumbled toward the house, liquor and rage fueling their steps. "Come out, witch," someone shouted. "You won't poison him and sit on his gold." Upstairs, Asher slept fitfully. If he faced them, even a single coughing fit would damn him. Celeste drew her shawl tight and stepped onto the porch. The door creaked open. Firelight flared, throwing her figure into sharp relief against the dark, straight-backed, alone, unarmed. The mob stilled, surprised by her calm. Bannon Quaid pushed forward, his face red with drink. "We know what you've been about, Celeste Boon. He wastes away while you meddle with foul herbs. You're killing him." A roar followed, clubs raised, faces twisted with certainty. Celeste did not retreat. "If tending a sick man is a crime, then name me guilty." The words cut deeper than shouting ever could. A ripple of unease passed through the crowd. "You see me boil broth, gather honey, garlic, onions, and you call it poison. But those same things have eased his breath, stilled his cough, let him sleep." Her gaze swept them, steady and unflinching. "You don't sit by his bed at night. You don't wipe cold sweat from his brow. You only stand outside and throw stones." Murmurs rose. A few torches dipped. Bannon sneered. "Pretty words don't prove anything. What proof do you have you aren't killing him slow?" Celeste's grip tightened on the railing. Her eyes burned brighter than their flames. "Proof?" she said.
If I wanted him dead, he'd be gone already. He lives because I chose otherwise." The crowd wavered, anger clashing with doubt. Then the floorboards behind her creaked. Celeste turned. Asher Boon stood in the doorway, pale, gaunt, wrapped in a thin robe. One hand braced against the frame, the other trembling at his side. His eyes, lit by torchlight, burned with fierce clarity. A hush fell. He lifted his head and spoke, each word costing him dearly. "If I live, it is because of my wife. If I die, it will be by sickness, not by her hand." Silence swallowed the night. When pain crushed my chest, who stayed awake? When death drew close, whose hand held me here? He looked past them all. "Not one of you." Faces shifted, shame crept in. Then Asher's gaze locked on a man standing near the back, Raymond Boone. The recognition moved through the crowd like a spark. Pieces fell into place, whispers, timing, greed. "You want to know who spread the lies? There he stands." No one defended Raymond. He turned away, swallowed by the dark. One by one, the torches lowered. Men stumbled back, muttering, retreating into the prairie night. Celeste caught Asher as his strength gave out, wrapping her arm around him. The fire died. What remained was something stronger than fear. Trust, tempered in flame. Winter loosened its grip slowly, reluctantly, as though unwilling to release the land it had claimed. Frost lingered on fence rails long after sunrise, and the wind still carried teeth when it crossed the open prairie. Yet inside the house on the hill, something had shifted. The air no longer felt weighed down by waiting. Since the night of torches, the town had grown quieter. Whispers still drifted through Silverbrook. Old habits died hard, but they lacked their former venom. Men who once laughed too loudly now lowered their voices when Celeste Boon passed. Women who had turned away in the market studied her with something closer to respect. They had seen Asher stand, had heard him speak, and the image refused to fade. Asher himself changed in ways no one could deny. At first it was subtle. He lingered longer on the porch without leaning on his cane. He crossed the yard without stopping to catch his breath. Then came the morning Celeste looked out the window and saw him leading the old bay horse from the barn, his movements slow but deliberate. "Don't you dare!" she called, stepping onto the porch. He looked back at her with a flash of boyish defiance. "Let's see if I remember how." He mounted with care. The horse walked the slope, and Asher sat tall against the pale sky. Celeste pressed a hand to her mouth as tears stung her eyes. She had fought for every breath he drew. Seeing him ride felt like witnessing a quiet resurrection. From then on, he rode daily. He spoke with the hands, inspected fences, sat in the sun like a man reclaiming time. Rumors shifted again. There must be something keeping him tied to this life, people said. Celeste paid them no mind. Spring brought green to the valley and dizziness to her mornings. She knew before she spoke it aloud. When she told Asher, he went very still, as if the news might vanish if he moved. "A child?" he whispered. She nodded. He took her hands, pressing them to his chest. "God has given us another life." Fear walked alongside joy through the months that followed. Celeste's body bore the weight of years of labor, and she was no longer young. But each night, as she felt the steady beat within her, she knew this child was not a promise meant to shame the past, but to answer it. When the boy arrived, the labor was long and punishing. Yet when the cry finally rang out, strong and insistent, Celeste wept with relief. Asher sat beside her, tears tracking down his weathered face as he touched the child's cheek with trembling fingers. "Elias," he said, "after my father." The town took notice. No one whispered of curses now. No one dared speak of schemes. The child thrived, red-cheeked and sturdy, carried proudly in his father's arms across the porch each evening. Years passed like seasons do, quietly, steadily. Asher lived 15 years longer than anyone had predicted. Illness never fully loosed its hold, but it no longer ruled him. He rode the range. He taught the Elias the land, the horses, the difference between wealth earned and wealth owed. Celeste aged with grace carved by endurance. Her hair silvered, her hands grew rougher, not weaker. When she walked through town, hats tipped, greetings followed. She had become part of the land itself. When Asher sickened again, the house filled with stillness rather than fear. Celeste tended him as she always had, cool cloths, steady hands, quiet words. Elias, now grown, hovered until his mother gently said, "Your father once walked out of darkness. All we can do now is stay beside him." One morning, light spilled across the bed as Asher clasped Celeste's hand. "I lived longer than anyone believed," he whispered. "All of it because of you." She smiled through tears. "You gave me a home, a name, a life where I was seen." He closed his eyes. His breath faded like wind at dusk. They buried him on the hill. Silverbrook came in full. Men who once held torches stood with heads bowed. On his stone, Celeste had carved the truth. Asher Boon, saved by love. Years later, Celeste still sat on that porch. Children and grandchildren gathered close. People no longer whispered when she passed. They remembered. Not the scandal, the legacy. A woman once cast out became the inheritance of a land. A man once called dying lived long enough to leave the world gentler than he found it. Love, Celeste had proven, was not measured by skin, nor age, nor the clamor of crowds, but by endurance. And that was enough.